The problem is we've forgotten how to be genuinely proud of our great countries, both America and the United Kingdom, two of the greatest countries in the world. It's almost like every day now, somebody somewhere, normally on the left, the woke left, is queuing up to find a reason to hate the countries and their histories.
Well, it's a kind of grievance competition. Your guest earlier just tried to engage in it. I don't know what hurt she believes she's had from slavery. All of this was addressed 2 centuries ago. Everything has consequences. All history has consequences and ramifications. But, if we were to play this fairly, we would at least look at all of the countries around the world that engaged in the slave trade who are simply not interested in any form of reparations. The Ottoman Empire, all the Arab countries who not just traded far more slaves than across the Atlantic, but castrated all the men so that there wouldn't be any more African slaves after them. They worked them to the bone. I see no interest across Africa in paying reparations for selling their brother and sister Africans into slavery or for working them to the bone to the present day. There is slavery across Africa today. In fact, there are more slaves in the world today than there were at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. So some of us are simply a bit bored of hearing people ripping at closed wounds and then crying about their hurt or their presumed hurt.
If you take $350,000 or $840,000 and you write a check to any group of people, black, white, poor, homeless, whatever, you give any group of people that much money and say, there you go, best of luck, and you come back in 6 months, they're going to be broke. So whatever reparations are done, that would be an absolute disaster as opposed to guidance and help in creating generational wealth as opposed to income.
Right.
That would be an absolute disaster.
Slavery ended 160 years ago. It's wrong to ask taxpayers, many from families like mine who came to the U.S. after slavery ended, to pay for the wrongs of slavery. The people involved have long since died, both perpetrators and victims.
No one ever says that that there's going to be mismanagement of funds when we're talking about the distribution of reparations payments to other communities.
Do you know that the slave owners were compensated? After they lost their quote-unquote property, the government compensated slave owners.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so when people talk about reparations, do they really want to have that conversation? Because, like it or not, slavery was legal. And so their property, their legal property, was taken away from them after the Civil War. So you can make an argument that the people that are owed reparations, and not only just black people, but also the people whose, quote, property, close quote, was taken away after the end of the Civil War.
But the slave owners did get paid by the government after they, emancipated slaves. So I don't understand what point he's trying to make, other than appeal to awful racists in the country, right? Like, let's not talk about reparations, because if we do talk about reparations, then we'll have a conversation about paying the slave owners. But the slave owners did get paid.
Yeah.
The people who were exploited, who were tortured, brutalized, forced to work for free, they didn't get anything. I mean, it's just okay.
Yeah. So it's called District of Columbia Emancipation Act. It was in 1862, and it applied to the District of Columbia, but it was really important as a national precedent. And they paid slave owners $300 for every slave after they were emancipated in the district, okay? So the slave owners did get reparations in that context.
February 19th, 1942 is a day that will forever live on in infamy, a notch in America's ugly past of hatred, bigotry, and xenophobia.
It is a story that unfortunately not everybody still knows about.
On that day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, 2 months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the event that thrusted the U.S. into World War II. The order called for the incarceration of 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry. The vast majority were American-born citizens.
Really dark chapter in American history. The systemic racism that incarcerated my father
and my mother and all of my aunts and uncles.
This is John Osaki's father. He was incarcerated at the Tule Lake Relocation Center just outside of the California-Oregon border with thousands of other Japanese Americans in 1942. Ripped from their homes, stripped of their belongings, and forced to live in awful conditions like horse stables at the Tanforan racetrack in San Bruno until shortly after the war ended. 80 years later, Japanese Americans are vowing to remember.
Means of healing and remembrance for members of the community who experienced the injustice.
The U.S. government apologized to Japanese Americans in 1988 with the passage of the Civil Liberties Act, signed by President Reagan. And with that apology came reparations for $20,000 to surviving Japanese Americans.
The members of Congress and distinguished guests, my fellow Americans, we gather here today to right a grave wrong. More than 40 years ago, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry living in the United States were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in makeshift internment camps. This action was taken without trial, without jury. It was based solely on race, for these 120,000 were Americans of Japanese descent. Yes, the nation was then at war, struggling for its survival, and it's not for us today to pass judgment upon those who may have made mistakes while engaged in that great struggle. Yet we must recognize that the internment of Japanese Americans was just that, a mistake. Congressman Norman Mineta, with us today, was 10 years old when his family was interned. In the congressman's words, my own family was sent first to Santa Anita Racetrack. We showered in the horse paddocks. Some families lived in converted stables, others in hastily thrown together barracks. We were then moved to Heart Mountain, Wyoming, where our entire family lived in one small room of a rude tar paper barrack. Like so many tens of thousands of others, the members of the Mineta family lived in those conditions not for a matter of weeks or months, but for 3 long years. The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors, surviving Japanese Americans, of the 120,000 who were relocated or detained. Yet no payment can make up for those lost years. So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong. Here we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law. I'd like to note that the bill I'm about to sign also provides funds for members of the Aleut community who were evacuated from the Aleutian and Pribilof Islands after a Japanese attack in 1942. This action was taken for the Aleut's own protection, but property was lost or damaged that has never been replaced. And one young actor said, "Blood that is soaked into the sands of a beach is all of one color." America stands unique in the world, the only country not founded on race, but on an ideal. Not in spite of, but because of our polyglot background, we have had all the strength in the world. That is the American way. The name of that young, I hope I pronounced this right, was Ronald Reagan. And yes, the ideal of liberty and justice for all, that is still the American way. Thank you and God bless you, and now let me sign H.R. 442, so fittingly named.
Now, Germany has agreed to extend $1.4 billion to Holocaust survivors all over the world. This payment is scheduled to be made in 2024. Since 1952, the German authorities have been paying a form of reparation to Jews who survived the horrors of the Holocaust. So far, the government has paid more than $90 billion to these individuals for the suffering that they have undergone at the hands of the Nazis. Now, according to reports, every year from 2024 to 2027, the German Finance Ministry has set an amount to be paid out per survivor. The payments stand as follows. For 2024, every survivor will get paid over $1,300. For 2025, this amount is marginally increased to $1,425. In 2026, the reparation stands at $1,480. And lastly, in 2027, every survivor gets paid a little over $1,500. The survivors who receive this aid are mostly Russian Jews. They reportedly were not in the horrifying camps or ghettos like the other European Jews. However, the Russian Jews have survived what is referred to as Nazi mobile killing units.
In honor of Holocaust Remembrance Day, Governor Hochul announced $2.6 million that will be dedicated to supporting Holocaust survivors.
Great to be back in Borough Park. As I said to David, I'm here a lot. And to come this particular week, Holocaust Remembrance, President Biden acknowledged that we should honor this the entire week. I say we honor it 365 days a year. This is not a one-day, one-week phenomenon, but we'll take this week to pause and I reflect on what that means. And it's what they went through was not just life-changing for them. And for many, they carried these memories and scars with them through life, but it also was always that touchstone that when they had the challenges that came later as residents in a foreign land, United States of America, and settling in New York, no matter how complicated life got or challenges, they always could touch back and say, but look what I overcame. Look what I survived. Look what I endured. And because of those experiences, I will say there's no one with as much heart but as much strength as these incredible women. So please stand up, our Holocaust survivors. Let's give you a round of applause for the lessons you are teaching all of us. We are here to recommit ourselves to supporting the survivors. And it is our duty, not just as New Yorkers, but as citizens of the world. And it's something I take very seriously. But while I'm governor, and I hope to be governor a long time, God willing, I want to make sure we have the resources to take care of you. So I can say we should take care of people and help them thrive and do well, but we need to put money behind it. And I'm here today to announce $2.6 million in funding for the Holocaust Survivors Initiative. This is for 29 organizations that provide critical social services to our survivors. So you don't have to go wanting. And the organizations of people that are so compassionate and dedicated to doing what we do right here will have the resource to make your lives even more enriched and to give you whatever service you need, but just to have opportunities in a safe, loving environment, something you were denied.
Israel and the United States have a special relationship.
Unprecedented.
So special that Israel gets more than half of all U.S. foreign aid. What kind of aid are we talking about? And more importantly, why does the U.S. keep it flowing? This is The Real Deal on U.S. aid to Israel. Simply put, the U.S. gives Israel money. Lots of it. To be precise, a grand total of $121 billion and counting. And unlike U.S. aid to most other countries, money to Israel is given primarily to its military. Why?
The security of Israel. Preventing a nuclear Iran and ending the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
The idea that a member of the United States Congress cannot visit a nation, which, by the way, we support to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, is clearly an outrage. And if Israel doesn't want members of the United States Congress to visit their country to get a first-hand look at what's going on, and I've been there many, many times, but if he doesn't want members to visit, maybe he can respectfully decline the billions of dollars that we give to Israel.
We're also going to discuss the ironclad commitment, and this is, I'll say this 5,000 times in my career, the ironclad commitment the United States has to Israel based on our principles, our ideas, our values. They're the same values. And I've often said, Mr. President, if there were not an Israel, we'd have to invent one.
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Well, a solemn day across the world as we recognized Holocaust Remembrance Day.
78 years to the day the Nazi concentration camp at Auschwitz was liberated, but not before millions of Jews were killed in Europe. Stephanie Bertini gives us a look at how events around the city marked the somber occasion.
International Holocaust Remembrance Day, honoring the lives lost, is underlined with an emphasis on history never repeating itself. That's the focus at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. A new exhibition called The Holocaust, What Hate Can Do tells the story of anti-Semitism.
The main thing was to put the Holocaust and what hate can do in the context of what life was before, then, and since.
Museum president and CEO Jack Kliger points out a part that's especially close to his heart and his mission, a display of stars Jewish people were forced to wear as identifiers during the Nazi regime. The more than 30 yellow stars in photos include his mom.
Interestingly, I had donated a photo of my mother.
On this day, he is especially reflective.
This day was the day that the biggest death factory of the war, the Auschwitz camp, was liberated by the Russian soldiers.
It was the United Nations that chose January 27th as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. In Auschwitz, a ceremony today. And in Manhattan, a call for change. Borough President Mark Levine, joined by the descendants of Holocaust survivors, demanding city leaders remove the names of former French Nazi collaborators Henri Philippe Pétain and Pierre Laval from the Canyon of Heroes.
It is unacceptable that these two men would occupy a place of honor here.
As the world continues to remember those closest to the Holocaust, press for us to never forget. Stephanie Bertini, Fox 5 News.
Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the city is letting people know about it. Link NYC kiosks across the city feature the caption, "We Remember." 20,000 Holocaust survivors live here in the city. On social media, people are posting photos with the hashtag We Remember. It's all part of a campaign by the World Jewish Congress to educate people about the Holocaust and preserve its memory. One World Trade Center and City Hall will also get special illumination.
I'm supposed to love America, but America don't love me. The son of a slave of the father of this country. Freedom wasn't meant to be a luxury for you and I. Freedom came after many influential people died. In vain it seems, ain't a whole lot changed. They still cracking whips and shackling up niggas, man. Projects ain't nothing but modern day plantations, and the masters reside at the police stations, replacing whips with Berettas and clips on their hips. Quick to gang up on young brothers who make that grip. I used to think that stacking papers would eliminate lack of pussy to fucking police that player hate. I found out that a bitch is gonna be a bitch, and the police could give a fuck that a nigga's rich. Old white men from the days of the cotton pickers who used to ride around on pickup trucks lynching niggas. They them same peckerwoods acting like a hoe when they see a nigga moving in next door. In front of my own home, rough me up and harass me and say you did it all in the line of duty.
Oh yeah, I remember when the South was ablaze, when you couldn't even look a crowd.